Hey, welcome to the 452nd episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patrons Sarab Chakraborty, Kimberly DiVincenzo, Robbie Ride, Drew Pierce, and Courtney. I'm Matt Enlow.
And I'm Oren Kaplan, and today we are talking to a buddy of mine, Ruth Dew. She's also a very talented filmmaker. She's been producing and directing for a while. She's made a Lifetime movie. She's made independent feature. She's made all sorts of things. She had movies that she produced that were at South by and a lot of other awesome festivals. She ran the AT&T Directing Lab with Lena Waithe. And she also has a new movie that she wrote and directed called Samson. That is a genre-bending picture that should be out right now. I think if you're listening to this, it is out on VOD. Check it out. It's Samson, Samson, and it is awesome. And she also just wrote an article in No Film School about how to film scenes in a trunk, because this is not a Ryan Reynolds, everything takes place in the trunk of a car movie, but there is a nice long sequence in a trunk. And I thought one of my favorite parts talking to her was when I was like, a trunk, it's so dark in there. Like, how do you even film in there? And then
she was like, let me tell you all the reasons why you're wrong.
Exactly. And she itemized all the different light sources inside of a trunk beyond like a flashlight. So
yeah, it's pretty great. It's a wonderful conversation. You know, I think like we dig in on the wealth of knowledge from her career and talk a good amount about Samson. But the thing that I loved the most about the conversation, outside of Ruth just feeling like immediately like we knew her, you know, she's one of us, like in the trenches, working with the same people, just kind of a day in, day out, like working class filmmaker in a really exciting and familiar way. So smart, so funny. It's cool, it's inventive and fun, but like really tries to like keep the audience guessing about where it's going to go in ways that we talked about on and off mic. Give it a download because I think it'll be cool.
Yeah.
There's some surprises we left off the show.
Yes. And if you want to find out exactly where you can watch the movie, you can go to watchsamson, samson.com and see where it's playing. And it was really fun to catch up with Ruth. Her and I worked together when I was making a viral video branded campaigns for Quiznos, the sandwich people. And it was fun. And she was always like very ambitious from the day I met her.
Every part of that sentence is out of date.
Yes.
Is Quiznos around anymore? No, right? Like they're gone. I wonder why.
I do believe Quiznos, Quiznos.com is still...
You love the subs. You love the subs.
The toasty subs. Oh man, I used to get so angry at them because they would have these focus groups and they'd be like, when you think toasted subs, do you think of Quiznos? And people would be like, sure. And they're like, great, that's the marketing. It's about toasted subs. And I was like, yeah, but everyone toasts your subs if you ask them to. Like you can, but Subway, they'll put your bread and cheese and meat in a toaster. So what's the difference?
Well,
why?
I guess I certainly think of Quiznos as toasty, and
really
Subway is like, fresh? Garbage.
Oh, interesting.
Oh.
So you like Quiznos better than Subway?
Yeah. That's like, do you want a sandwich or a turd? Like I hate Subway. I don't hate Subway. But to be fair, a lot of it, not all of it, I think that the food is very low quality and bad objectively, but also I would, if they want to sponsor us,
we will love it. No, I like Subway.
It's your preferred sandwich option. Remember that campaign. Anyway, I would eat Subway when I was especially broken poor. Like my darkest days were always with a half of $5 footlong in my stomach.
Yeah, when I grew up, my mom would make me. I didn't like ketchup or mustard or mayonnaise. I decided that, and I didn't like lettuce or onions either. So my mom would make me these sandwiches that were like white bread or wheat bread, even worse, and like a couple slices of turkey. And it just turned me off of sandwiches. They were just so disgusting that I really didn't eat sandwiches again until I was an adult. And now I love going to Subway and getting like pepperoncinis and roast beef and lettuce and onions and pickles and salt and pepper and the mayo and the aioli. I don't know. Now it's really cheap at Subway.
Well, enough about that. A little bit more about Samson after we talk about Patreon. Patreon.com/JustShootItPod is a place where you can throw us a buck or two to keep the show going. If you think to yourself, boy, it'd be cool if my name was at the top of a podcast episode, this is your chance for even just a buck or two. Also, we've got more live shows coming. You're going to find out about the live shows before everybody else, and maybe even have tickets to them.
For sure. If you want to have a touch point with this exclusive world of podcasting, an industry reserved only for the top top 0.00001% of society. We will say your name literally at the beginning of a podcast.
Look, I guarantee it's fun to hear. It's fun to hear.
Oh yeah, no, of course it's fun to hear.
Yeah.
It's like
worth a buck, that's for sure.
If you can't afford Cameo, give us $1.
Well, but Cameo just like if Cameo just surprised you, just every once in a while, Snooki said, "Hey, how's it going, Oren?" That'd be worth a couple bucks for sure.
My wife worked with Snooki once.
I know. That's why I brought it up. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, check it out. Patreon.com/shootapod. And without any further delay, here's the rest of the show. What your email signature says Ruth Dance in parentheses do.
I know, because, Ruth Du's my credited professional name, but legally it's Ruth Dance.
Mm.
It's real tricky.
Like, honestly, the whole last name thing with my wife, and we have friends, so many friends that are doctors and stuff, and it's like your doctor and then Mrs. Chala, you have totally different name. And I'm like,
is that so hard? No.
Yeah, dude, it sucks being a woman and then getting married and then having to change your email address.
Sure. I mean, there's a very easy answer for that, Oren. Don't change your name.
Yeah. Or do what Tim did.
Yeah.
Suffer with your wife.
Yeah, sure.
Both change your last name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ruth, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been a while since I've seen you. Ruth and I used to work together at Window Seat Pictures, which was a film production company and agency. And we made some virally videos, parodies, comedies, all sorts of things. But then you left Window Seat and just started making a million movies.
Before I left Window Seat, I went to Barrow 15 for 3 months. Do you remember
where
this?
Where we worked together. Yes. I mean, it was the same company.
Yeah.
We just changed the
name. But officially with Joe Mack.
Yeah.
I was his development person for 3 months. And then...
on the feature side.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was kind of it was early days of my LA life, but that was kind of my first dip into kind of the development space in feature life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, really interesting, and I learned a lot. And
well, I'm curious, what did you learn? Tell me about those 3 months. I know this is a crazy pivot very early on, but what you were in the world of traditional producing, and all of a sudden you're in development. What surprised you about it? What was different?
It's a numbers game. It's a huge numbers game. I remember literally on day one, we printed photos of actors' faces and put them on a gigantic wall and ranked them in order of how much pre-sales that we can get from each person to try to fit the perfect cast for this one film that we needed money for. And we were getting ready to go to market, which is why this is all happening. And I was like, man, these are great actors. I know these actors to be good at certain performances, but their nuanced work by their previous, accolades. But in that very moment in that room, these actors were just numbers.
Yeah.
And it was insane for me to think about in that way.
Yeah. You're like, Jean-Claude Van Damme is that big a number?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There were so many of those surprises that, and I learned why, right? I understood how kind of the international market works in pre-sales. And I think that was my biggest takeaway from working in the office. I didn't last very long. I only lasted 3 months.
Well, and also in terms of context, what year was this? Where because I think that game has changed, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the good old days in a certain sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Probably 2015.
Yeah.
2015.
Yeah. So that we're still, it seemed like an international market where you could, grin and bear it and just kind of put together a cool action movie and, with some thriller elements, and it's a little sexy. And if you put, a few of those actors from your wall in there, it would make sense to get financed. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think at that time, Netflix still had DVDs. Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was really way before streaming, and it was really still about going to the movies and theatrical and making that biggest box office splash. And then I think right around the time when I left, when things were kind of shifting a little bit, there were more online streaming. I think at that point, the cable channels started to stream the first 2 episodes of every season of television that they had. And that, you know what I mean? They went through that rotation of they air on a Tuesday, was available on a Wednesday for a week, etc. And that was how we watched shows late.
Yeah.
Wait, but Matt, you don't think that nowadays, if I'm I got Mel Gibson as Santa Claus in this crazy violent action movie.
Yeah, you definitely can, for sure. But there's a reason why there are fewer of those around, and it's because there's a big difference between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Mel Gibson, right?
Yeah.
As an easy example, right? And so in order to get someone like that now, there are fewer people on that list. And also the stakes are just different for sure, right? Like think about what Ruth was saying was like, oh, the change in streaming essentially has shifted the expectations of the market such that even 10 years ago, the difference between what you expected to pay for a movie and what you expect to pay for a movie now are drastically different, right? Because what we're describing in those days is a direct-to-DVD release that had an international, play, basically something you would take to AFM or something like that. Now you're describing like a Hulu deal, right? Like, okay, like you can put together this package with these people and they pre-sale it, but like how many movies does Hulu make versus how many independent features were being made back then? And really like 20 years ago is really what we're talking about. Like Ruth, you were doing it at kind of the tail end of that model being viable.
Yeah, I guess I feel like it's not about the Hulu deal is like you have a movie or a show that you're trying to get financed, or even like, I think Ruth and I both directed Lifetime movies, and there's like a certain way that's done. I think still probably happens.
Definitely still. I just had lunch with a friend who is part of that machine, and I was like, it's not a bad life. I was like, tell me more.
You want to give up the artistry part of it?
I don't know. Hold on, man. We just said 2 commercial directors, right? Like,
yeah, but I mean, I think anyone that makes a Lifetime movie maybe makes a second one and then it's like, okay, I'm done, right?
Or they're just cranking them, or they're just on the flywheel. Like, yeah, I'm happy to be making a movie every quarter. So no disrespect for sure.
Yeah, I feel like those who keep making them and keep going with the circus really lean into the fact of what they're making. Mm-hmm. And this was perhaps my mistake with my first Lifetime movie. I think I pushed the button a little too much in terms of what I wanted to do with it. Mm-hmm. And the producers and the production company took notice, and I did not get a second call to come back. Mm-hmm. Even though I'm very proud of what we did, and like I still get residuals from that movie.
Well, the fact that you're proud of it is because you didn't do what they wanted you to do.
Just as a pushback, and I'm not saying I don't agree with both of you. I do for sure, and I think that there's fun in playing with form and pushing boundaries and all that stuff. But I think about it this way, because I made a Christmas movie a couple of years ago with my wife that was kind of outside the box of Christmas movies. You think of a Christmas movie as one thing, and it delivered in those on some of those aspects, but not all of those aspects. But as a result, I kind of immersed myself in that world a little bit and went to panels at AFF talking about Christmas movies and stuff. And I have walked away with a newfound appreciation for them. But like, if I was to make a Christmas movie for Hallmark, but there wasn't any romance, or, the actors were much younger and they weren't in their mid 30s or early 40s, or like they didn't, drink hot cocoa, or there was no snow, then I maybe don't understand the thing I'm supposed to be making. Right? Like I always say, it's kind of like if someone was like, I'm going to make you chocolate chip cookies, but what if they weren't chocolate chip cookies? And you're like, no, dude, I love chocolate chip cookies. Just make those. And you can put some salt on them if you want, or like you could maybe, but like, don't mess with the recipe. Like we're into a Hallmark Christmas movie for that warm blanket, that snuggly feeling. That's what people want. And that's kind of true, I think, for any genre, but like Lifetime, like true crime, ripped from the headline sort of stuff, and Hallmark are the most stark examples of that. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think there's a difference between Hallmark Christmas movie and Hallmark movie in general, and Lifetime thriller, where at least, they'll get a filmmaker like Ruth or like myself who's just made, has some indie film credit or passion or whatever. And they'll be like, okay, here's the thriller. It's a woman in danger and there's a killer. And you're like, awesome, handheld car mount, running around, do this thing. And then literally when we screened my movie for the executives, the one executive, she said, this is the worst looking movie I think we've ever produced. And I was like,
you turned in a Joe Carnahan movie and they wanted something else?
I mean, like a movie that wanted to be a Joe Carnahan movie, not without the resources. Sure. Right. But I was like, because you think this is the worst movie? And she's like, yeah, I don't mean it as an insult. It just like doesn't look very good. I'm like, because it's like handheld and contrasty, like because not everything is like flatly lit, and it's like a woman being kidnapped in a car and having a fight on the street, like, and you want it to just be like bright and soft lit. And she's like, yeah, I don't know, I just don't, I can't tell you why, I just don't think it looks good. Like, okay, thanks. So yeah, you know, but if you hire someone to make a thriller and then you tell them to make it look like a Christmas movie, it's pretty much what Lifetime wants.
Yeah. And I think what it is, it's like making different choices. Like I remember on my Lifetime, I really used like this wide angle lens once, and it was like a big deal talking about it because everyone's like, why does it look weird? I'm like, because she's in a state of panic because we're trying to understand how she's
but we have to remind people she's beautiful.
I'm like, she is stunning, you know, but like in this moment, we're just going to get a little funky with it because this is how we are. Like, this is a woman in postpartum and she's lost, and her nanny's trying to like, you know, seduce her husband. Everything's going crazy. So it was just so funny, like the conversations that, you know, you're at Village and everyone's kind of talking behind your back, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's just, we're here. Lenses on. We're running out of time. Please roll the camera. Luckily, my DP and I, we were both like down with it. And so we were definitely pushing, and we were on the same team versus I feel like if I worked with somebody who wasn't on the same page with me creatively, it would be a little bit more of that standard Lifetime-y movie, which again is totally fine. Like I've watched a lot of them. Like I would say my second thriller was more of that standard feel just because I learned from the first one. What was your
second thriller called?
The second thriller was called The Deadliest Lie. It's on Tubi. It was the first.
It's not the one that Mitch wrote, is it?
It is the one that Mitch wrote.
Oh, you know Mitch Altieri, past guest.
Yes.
It was just on recently. Yeah. For his movie. The horror movie. And that was kind of a thriller, right?
Yeah, it was a very dark thriller. The original script that Mitch kind of, I think, handed in had all kinds of fun, sexy things in it that we had to tweak for a more general.
Sure. Was this, you said it was for Tubi. Was it made for Tubi specifically?
So that film was the first Mar Vista Tubi collaboration.
Like
so it was right before the official merger, from what I understand it to be, at least.
Wait, sorry. Yeah. Newsflash for me. Did Tubi and Mar Vista merge?
So Tubi, Fox owns Tubi. So Fox
Tubi
then
was purchased by
bought.
Fox. I see.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, and so then Fox, when Fox went to Mar Vista, they were like now one big company, but at the time they were still separated.
I see.
But this was the very first partnership between Tubi directly and Mar Vista. And Tubi is actually the streaming platform for Fox and always has been.
Like in the way that Pluto is for Paramount or Freevee. Whatever. I guess Freevee is gone.
Freevee.
Yeah, but before
Amazon.
Prime.
Now it's,
but now it's just Amazon.
They just wrapped it into Prime, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, so I want to ask you a question for our listeners, because you did the Lifetime movie, you did this Mar Vista thriller for Tubi. Let's say I'm a director that just wants to make these types of movies. Like how do you get that job? Like I can tell you, I know how I got my job, but it was in 2010 or whatever. You did it more recently.
So because I worked in production, the majority of my like budding career, like probably, I don't know, since I graduated college.
Like as a producer.
In any production role, like production coordinator, UPM,
you worked your way
and so
up,
forth.
Basically.
Yeah, I just had a lot of experience and met a lot of different producers and directors just working in the industry. And at a certain point, I, got the guts to talk about myself as a director. That's kind of the first step of like admitting it, right? And I just started talking about that a lot more with a lot of different friends and colleagues. And there was this one company that had hired my friend who I definitely saw as a mentor at the time. And I was like, how do I get to do this? I want to do this. And it was basically 2 years of following up with the initial general of that production company for them to finally be like, what are you doing? Do you want to do this movie? Do you mind shadowing this other project for a couple of days?
Sorry.
And then we'll give you one.
So following up, you mean, so you had a meeting with someone that works at this production company that makes these types of TV movies or straight to video or whatever kind of type of films they are. And you said, I want to direct one of these movies. And then just like every month or so, you would email them and say like, hey, check out my new work?
I was just checking in. I had to, because I think for a company to take the risk on somebody new is always like, can we not? And obviously their first choice is going to be somebody else who they've worked with, right? And so I feel like I kind of got in at a time where they were kind of running low, to be honest, of the regular call list. And it was also, I think, during a time where there was a lot of conversation going on in the industry about female directors and opportunities. And so suddenly to them, they're like, oh shit, we have to really like get on the ball here. We really just like can't keep hiring the 3 same white guys over and over again, really open up a Rolodex, which is helpful for someone like me to get this opportunity.
And you'd already directed a movie before that?
No. So that was your first movie was my first feature. Yeah.
And what materials wise, when you said like, oh, you kept following up, were you following up with a new short film or just checking in? What did follow up sound like from you?
Yeah, I think the initial general, it was such a long time ago. So I think the initial general was like, I have a lot of these great shorts in the past. I like this genre. I think, dark and twisty is definitely something in my wheelhouse. And so they liked the shorts. And I think it was just more of like, I'm still here. Maybe I don't have anything new. Maybe I did a proof of concept. Don't really remember, but please don't forget me. And I'm willing and eager to learn. And I had to shoot out my producing credits also to let them know I'm still engaged with the industry. I think that was still helpful. Oftentimes when I produce, I work pretty closely with the director, which is always great because you kind of like learn from what they do, right and wrong. That's always great for me. And so that's kind of the check-ins that I've got with that company.
Yeah, being a producer, and you had produced a film that was at South by at that point, or you'd produced some stuff that had some nice accolades, right?
I did. Yeah. I produced The Archer we were in production in 2016. South by was 2017. And I think My Baby Is Mine was 2017 as well.
Right. So I feel like you can feel safe hiring someone that understands how budgets work and how schedules work and it's much easier.
In a certain sense, that's more important to them, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a lower risk to hire a producer turned director than a writer turned director,
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, we shot those movies in like 12 days or something silly, and
that's fast.
Yeah. Those TV movies are insane. Yeah. And then it probably was on the air like a month later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like 3 months, I think. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I don't know, you get like a 2-week director's cut. I'm like, okay.
Sure.
I think what's like a really good lesson for people, and this probably happens with us too, Matt, like people like we've been on both sides, like people emailing us a lot, like even just to be on the podcast or something. And a lot of times we don't respond and people are probably like, fuck those guys. But if you have the attitude of what Ruth, like, okay, I'll just keep bugging them, every month for a few years. Eventually, at some point, like you start being a familiar person. It's easier to respond. Yeah. Or like I think of Sharon Bialy, who wrote this book about casting and how she said, and I've said this on the podcast before, but like sometimes she'll get a headshot in the mail. Usually she'll look at it. She'll look at the resume credits and throw it in the trash can. But if there happens to be something that she's casting that this is like a perfect match for, she'll just put it in that pile of like, oh, here, check out who this person is. And so that you need to kind of be this heartbeat. And I think the other thing that Ruth, you said that's super valuable is not just saying like, hey, can you get me a job? Or, hey, check out my short. But also, hey, I just was producing this thing and I ran into this person who mentioned you. So I thought I'd check in again. Like showing them that you're in the same circles. And even Rebecca, the EP from art class, Rebecca Niles had told us like she just seeing that you follow the same people as she does on Instagram,
sure,
like makes her feel like just a tiny bit more connected to you.
Oh yeah, we travel in the same circles. Yeah, I second all of that. The other thing that you made me think of that Ruth, I think you probably did great. And sometimes, not to pick on anyone, but sometimes Oren and I get emails that are great, but don't give you enough context. Like literally, I'm like, what are you pitching me for? Like, what does this person that you're pitching do? Are they a director? Do I have to Google them or not? Like,
or they'll send us a website with like 80 things they worked on, but we don't know what they did on any, anything. Whereas
Ruth, you had a meeting, right? But then you're still kind of reminding them, hey, I'm I'm a filmmaker. These are the ways in which I'm practicing my art, right?
Mhm.
Here are the ways in which I'm trustworthy and should be top of mind for you over and over again, right?
And I'm still interested, you know?
Sure,
I think people
sure.
forget that like over time, people's projections change. Like they might leave town, they might find a new love or whatever, you know? And so I think it's important that people know what you want to do, your end goal. I want to do this. I'm going to direct this movie. I want to direct for you, right? I think that's also a difference because it is like this industry is like ever evolving and we have to take pivots. And at the end of the day, though, if you're persistent, I think that will help. Like I always tell people, like I'm a huge Survivor fan. And like, I'm here to outwit, outlast, and outplay everyone if it takes, but I would never lie or backstab behind anybody. That's the difference.
Well,
That's the difference.
Well, then you're not going to win Survivor, Ruth. You know that.
Yeah.
You know that.
I would never actually win Survivor for sure. But I take the three key factors of play of the show to heart when it comes to working this industry.
Yeah.
You know John Lovett from Pod Save America?
Oh, yeah. Of course. I've been watching this season. I'm up to date.
Yeah.
And he was on Survivor.
Yeah. Have you watched?
I watched.
My wife is his Pilates instructor.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Yeah. And
that's so fun.
She's like, we saw him on the news. She's like, oh, that guy's in my Pilates class after the election. And I was like, oh, yeah. I listen to his podcast all the time. And she's like, oh, someone just told me he was on a Survivor guy.
So he only had spoilers, but it's
a short-lived time on that.
It was very short-lived.
It's actually like the worst thing to put on your Survivor resume is be the first person voted out.
Yeah.
It's such a bummer.
Survivor resumes.
It's a bummer. Yeah. He would have gone the distance.
That's how you win the game. That's what I'm saying. It's like once you get through a certain hump and your resume adds up, you're good to go.
Yeah.
I know a lot. I can go on about this, but I will not.
Same, Ruth. We'll sidebar later on.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about one other thing from your Survivor resume, which is being the executive director of the AT&T Hello Lab mentorship program. It's interesting because it's an interesting move for sure. I remember we talked on the phone a couple of times when you were doing it, but it's as a director, you're running a lab for directors. What's the Survivor chess move behind that whole thing?
You know, I had freelance for Hello Lab, which is essentially more like the agency that was running this program. I had freelance for them and I knew about the first 2 years of the program. And in my deepest, darkest desires, I wanted to be a director of the next round.
And what is Hello Lab?
Hello Lab is a former department of Fullscreen, back when Fullscreen was alive. And Hello Lab specifically was partnered with AT&T. So a lot of their content was AT&T cross promotions, collabs, etc.
So AT&T, Verizon has this Go 90 thing.
I think AT&T, I think they premeditated. I think they were in advance of Go 90, right? Like the AT&T full screen combo, right? Or no?
Yeah, so I don't exactly know because I wasn't staffed there. So, you know, I'm not part of the big conversations. But when I got in, AT&T was pretty much deep already in there because I think another company was also buying in on the full screen world. There's a lot of subs that I was not aware of, but our lab specifically was AT&T all in, and everything that I had worked on previously at the company was all AT&T. So I had known that client side of things really well. And I had line produced for them when Kelly Landry, also a former guest, was the showrunner of that. And so I was more or less freelancing for them for like a year on and off. So
They were a director's lab and they were producing shorts or like proofs of concept or?
Yes.
What?
So before I got in, they were a director's lab producing shorts. And I think in the past, it was like a nice like situation where they had a nice screening the very end and try to get as much people and press to go along with it. What was different with the year that I ran the show was they had a whole writers competition for the scripts. So previously, it was the directors who had written scripts or I found the scripts. So our program included a celebrity endorsement as well, which was Lena, when she was at the peak of her Lena-ness, like coming off fresh from the Emmy.
Master of None,
her own show.
Ready Player One.
Chi-Town, like the whole thing. And her company, Hillman Grad, was kind of a co-producer / other production company involved besides Hello Lab. And yeah, it was weird because I definitely wanted the $100,000 to make a movie. You know, I was
Is
like,
that what each person got?
yes.
Each person got $100,000 to make a short film that
Yes.
they did not write, that somebody else wrote.
Yeah, somebody else wrote. So how the program worked was we had an open call for scripts, had a whole system funneling down to like, I don't know, top 10 scripts. We had interviewed a bunch of directors to be our 5 select directors. And from those scripts, we paired up those directors what scripts they were most interested in directing. And then those were our final 5 writers, just to make sure style-wise,
Sure.
they would,
Sure. You don't get stuck with
they would
something
match
that
up.
you don't click with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you
'Cause
one of
we
the
had-
people that
yeah.
was interviewing directors?
I was.
And were you
I was.
like, every question was like, don't you think I should just direct this? You suck.
It wasn't. I mean, it was great. Honestly,
You sure you would do it that way? Really?
I was lucky.
All right.
You're
'cause
like, I can only find 4 great directors.
I was really proud of all the directors that we had. Some of them were recommendations per Lena directly.
Mhm.
Some of them were people that I had met throughout the year, recommendations and all that good stuff. And
Any
it
names
was
we would recognize? Anyone?
Sierra Shooter. She came out of the program to be very prolific TV director. Ava DuVernay was the direct mentor of Shooter. I mean, to be honest, everybody that came out of that program are like killing it. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. You should be. That's
I'm
right.
very proud of
That's
it.
right.
Part of me definitely, it was, let's say it was bittersweet, right? Because as a producer, your job is to support the creative and support the directors. That's your first and foremost, right? And you have other team members to help protect the budget, help protect the crew. So I was a producer on all 5 projects. We had their individual go-to leads as well, but I definitely touched all 5 projects. I went to all 5 sets. So I was kind of the liaison between the AT&T partner and the directors themselves. So it was probably the most involved freelance project because it was 1.5 years
Sure.
from start to finish.
Boy.
But also, again, really rewarding because we had incredible talent. We were able to get these amazing people because Lena was such a supporter of the program. And if Lena calls you, you pick up the phone, you know?
Mhm.
And so I think that was a perk from my end from a producing standpoint. And again, these shorts are really, really great. And I still have very lasting relationships with all of the fellows. So it was good.
And
but
how
listen,
did-
any filmmaker would want to take $100,000, of course.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll do
Yeah.
it, I guess.
Yeah.
And what's the budget? You get it. You get
$100,000?
$100,000.
Oh, that's not the rate?
Warren.
That's not the directing rate? Oh, never mind.
No, dude.
No, you get $100,000, but then that did not
Forget it.
include.
I thought that was
We
just
had
for
a
me.
separate plot of money for some casting, like special
Mm.
casting
Mhm.
Oh, cool.
dollars that
Any
did not
cool-
hit their budgets.
Any cool cast?
I think Rob Morgan was in one of our shorts, which is really cool. Dasha Palenko was really cool.
Cool.
Who else? Yeah.
It's funny you bring this up. It's a thing to think through. I think especially because we're living in commercials so regularly now. Or, and I know you were being facetious with the $100,000 rate versus budget, but like $100,000 is so much money, and
Yeah,
also
for a short film. Yeah.
for a short film, yeah, it's still a lot of money, but also it's so much that then all of a sudden everyone's getting paid. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so it kind of runs out
It
fast.
runs out real fast.
Yeah.
And then also,
You got to not mention the AT&T part when you're asking for locations.
sure, definitely, you still are hustling hard, even though it's a 6-figure budget. But then also, like, the director is jumping through way more hoops than if they had just shot a short film over one weekend or even 1 week.
Yes. Yes.
Right? There's publicity aspects to it. There's way more approvals. You were alluding to like, oh, there were mandates from AT&T and all of this stuff. Like all of that stuff adds up to real tangible work that a director has to do. Right.
But all those programs like AFI,
Sure, the DWW program.
like when
Yeah.
Hanali Culpepper was on the podcast, she'd just like fly herself to North Carolina for like 2 weeks and put herself up to shadow on a, on a TV show.
And-
like all those people are losing a ton of money. Like you kind of have
I
to
was in
be
one.
wealthy or something to
Or just
get through those
respect-
programs.
Yeah. I think like respecting. Well, I think the difference, like you mentioned, Matt, is like the studio system that we kind of made them go through.
Does the program guarantee like a TV episode or anything?
AT&T?
Yeah.
No, it did not guarantee anything. And that was my year. It was the last year it ran because AT&T bought everything and the department disappeared.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Was there one thing about when you interviewed the directors? What tricks did you steal from these interviewers or interviewees?
from being on the interviewee side, we just wanted to know distinctly if the filmmaker knew what they wanted to make, the kind of projects that they wanted to make, right?
Mhm.
All of them had distinct styles, and that was important within the program. So we can match up appropriate scripts. And so we can have 5 shorts that were really diverse and really, really interesting and all very different in style and tone. And so when I was interviewing for Film Independent, and this was the second time I had applied, maybe the third, but my first try wasn't that. When I got to the interview stage, I knew that I had to be very, very specific in who I was as a filmmaker. And I think luckily in 2020, I knew who I was as a filmmaker after doing these kind of direct for hire projects. I had a good idea of what I could do and what I wanted to do better, but I also wanted to
and what was that?
To,
actually, I'm curious. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you say?
Give us the answer to the.
Well, because I think every filmmaker probably starts off with like, well, I could do everything, right? Like every film student.
Oh, I love them. Yeah,
I love all movies, so I would like to, and TV, and also I
from
love TikTok
Oppenheimer
too.
all the way to Barbie.
Yeah,
and I think that's for me and from my experience, like those don't work because other people need to like kind of put you in a little bit of a box to understand you as a filmmaker, because everyone theoretically do everything if you work really hard for it. I think genre-wise, style-wise, we can learn different trades and stuff like that. I think from the thriller side, from those two experiences, I knew how to create really strong and interesting relationships between two people in a very, very short amount of time. I can understand what that is. I can kind of break that down really easily, give you some feelings behind it, right? And make you feel gross or weird, or I can just like create two people in a room really, really well and make you feel a certain way. And when going into an interview with Project Involve, I distinctly remember adding the fact that I really love relationship stories and I want to do it in a genre adjacent way. So there's got to be a little bit different about this scene or about this story. As much as I love two people in a coffee shop, let me give you two people in a coffee shop with a sci-fi element. Maybe the milkshake is poison. Maybe the waitress is a spy. Like, I don't know. For me, if I'm watching, and this goes with like what I enjoy watching as well, is like, I want to watch something that's not my real life. Because real life is really hard. I live it every single day. So if I'm able to make something, if I'm able to watch something, let it just be a little bit different. Let it be a different, feeling, surreal, magical, surrealistic, scary. So I went into that interview with kind of these details, and I think it worked. I did it. I got in.
Fuck coffee shops.
It definitely worked. Empirically, it worked. We know it worked.
Yeah. And I think if when I'm ever trying to like pitch myself as a director, that's kind of what I say. It's two people in a coffee shop plus something different. So
yeah,
cool.
That's great.
It's
really funny because
coffee shops. No, we get it.
That's also the recipe for sketch, right? Like they always they teach you like one thing is different. If you do two things that are different, then it's confusing and no good. It's just like you exaggerate one aspect of the thing. Right. And maybe that's just, you're making me realize that's the secret to all stories.
It is interesting. Yeah. My first feature, The Hammer, that Joe McAleer, who Ruth and I both worked with, produced, was like a sports family film like Rudy, but the main character was deaf, right? So a lot of it is in sign language. And so to me, it was always like this super accessible genre film with this one twist. And then, like now I'm pretty proud of the film, but like immediately after I kind of felt like there wasn't enough of a twist, that in the indie film space, someone speaking in sign language is just not, it's okay. That's a cool detail, to me, it was like such a big part of the movie, but then in hindsight, it's like, it kind of maybe felt too natural for the genre, of a sports family film. Like, that there's like an emotional feel good moment, or that there's someone overcoming adversity like that. They all do that. So it's interesting, like how many but you're right, Matt, if you change too many things, if it's like a mashup of 4 genres and now I'm not exactly sure what I'm watching, then it's like very easy to get detached from that.
I was going to say Samson, I think I think it's a good example of multiple genres put together in a very good way. Because
Samson, your feature.
Yes, Samson, my most recent feature that's coming out in a couple of weeks. Because I know what you're talking about, Matt. And like when there's a movie that is distinctly different from the first half and the second half, it really, really bothers me. Especially when there's not a moment where it kind of
Where we shift
transitions
gears.
in a good way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
And then it's
I want to clarify. I think that there's a difference between, right, like Samson, I think mixes lots of different genres, right? But I think, and you tell me, the root of what's different about it, I'm not talking about in a genre sense, I'm talking about in like a premise sense, in the twist, right? In your example of the coffee shop, right? It's if the waitress is a spy and it's sort of funny and a little dark and a little weird and shot really stylistically, all of that's okay. But if you do all of that and the waitress is a spy and also the milkshake is poison, that's when it's over.
Right.
That's when it's
Yeah.
too much, right? So it's
Well,
less about the window dressing and more about, like, from a premise perspective, what is different about this, you know?
Yeah, it's funny now that I think about it. Your movie does
Genre
matching
matching
in a coffee
is
shop.
the best. Yeah, for sure. It does. Yeah.
Two people talking.
And people get kidnapped, right?
People get kidnapped.
But it's not by hitmen and then also aliens and then also, you know what I mean? Like, that's when it gets...
It's not, dude, where's my car?
Yeah.
Right. You have to almost roll out the genres appropriately. And like each of them need to have a reason to happen.
Yeah.
You know, I think.
And you still need to pay off the first genre, even if you've added another genre into the mix, right?
Yeah.
You still need the rom-com
definitely think
payoff, even if you added the hitman twist.
We have to have that button before we move on to the next one. Otherwise, like, everything feels incomplete in a way, you know? And
so I'm curious, tell us all of the ingredients in Samson, right? Because Oren and I, know, like we've glossed over it a little bit. No spoilers, obviously, but like, you can dig in a little bit. Tell us all the different layers.
Okay. So Samson, at the very core, starts with a recently broken up couple reunited at a diner. And then they're suddenly kidnapped by men. That's the setup. It happens in the first, 1.5 minute. We see the whole thing. And, we sell it as a dark comedy thriller. And the dark comedy part is the fact that, whenever you have an ex situation forced to work together out of a crazy, heist kidnapping, it has to be funny because it's awkward. Because all of those relationship situations kind of come out, and that's what makes it really, really funny. And we lean into it because the first 10 minutes is this couple in the trunk. And so that's funny. We really, when you know someone for that long, naturally your conversations are going to be shorthand and it's going to allude to previous things, and that's going to be ridiculous. So we really lead into that fact. We also follow the story of the two kidnappers before they all kind of culminate to learn about who they are. And we discovered that they're not really good at their jobs. And that is inherently funny. They're very, very different people. One is kind of tougher. One is like a super amateur asking too many questions. And so that relationship is also really, really funny. And our tagline is Shakespearean Reservoir Dogs. And that's kind of the Reservoir Dog part coming out, is like a lot of quick banter, a lot of awkward pauses, conversations about the setup of the gun. Like, you see this really big insecurity coming out of them. So that's kind of the dark comedy part. The thriller part kind of happens and begins when you see all four characters at the same time, which I guess would be like our equivalent of like the shootout in a way. In the trailer, we reveal a gun, we reveal a shot. We don't really know what happens afterwards. And that's kind of a big sequence. And from there, we do a lot of other crazy things that will be spoilers, so I'm not going to talk about it. But we also add in another style and big genre choice soon after that shootout moment. And then it kind of gets really dark and twisty afterwards. And that's what the movie's about.
Okay, so you said then there's like another genre. So we have the kind of rom-com genre. We have this kidnapping hitman genre. And what's the third genre that you introduced?
There's definitely a point in the movie where we shift perspective to specifically one of the main characters. And we do that with a musical number.
That's awesome.
And it's pretty good. I mean,
Is there dancing as well? Is it
there is no dancing.
Yeah. Gotcha.
There are more artistic, unrealistic cinematic choices that happen within this sequence. It's almost like when you watch a dramatic piece and you see that redemptive moment of this main character, it's usually in a montage of sorts, right? That's exactly what goes on in this sequence, except she is singing the exact words of the song. And the song was written by an incredible artist named Claire London, who I worked with many moons ago in New York. I made a couple different music videos with her. And I was kind of going back into my Rolodex of like available songs that I can license for very little money. And they had to be friends. And I listened to Claire's entire album, and the song Hit the Switch was perfect, spot on of what our main character was going through, what was about to happen, what was going on internally for her. And so before we wrote it in, I needed to make sure Claire was down because I don't know, in a small movie, everything just needs to line up. Otherwise, like I'm not going to go out and try to license a song that I didn't know.
Sure. Yeah.
You know?
And
too?
I mean, as a director, you got to produce everything. So
Sure.
yeah.
Well, and that's what I was going
so.
to say is like, that's your producer hat showing, right? Because
Yeah.
I know plenty of filmmakers that are like,
Oh yeah, we'll
well,
put this
but-
Bruce Springsteen song in, and then
Sure.
we'll just get it.
sure. Well, or other people where that there isn't a happy ending, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I was curious just about the trunk sequence real quick. What was your like visual approach to filming
Yeah.
like a whole sequence?
10
where
minutes in
people
a
are
trunk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we built a trunk so we can have control over it. It was definitely not in a real trunk because it was in the moving vehicle. So we built a trunk, and we knew to keep people interested, we needed to just move the camera as much as possible.
Wait, could you just park the car and film in that trunk without building said trunk?
10 minutes.
They were
And
inside the trunk.
yeah.
Do you,
Two people
do you
inside
remember
the
how
trunk.
big camera bodies are these days?
Yeah.
And who's
Are they
pulling
big or
focus?
small?
Yeah.
The camera bodies are pretty big these days. So
How are you
yeah.
lighting it, actually, is my question. Because I had kind of guessed, like, oh, I would probably build a trunk as well. It's probably probably a little forgiving. Like, you can maybe make it a tiny bit bigger. You won't be able to tell, you know.
Just pull away walls and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what we did. The trunk was larger than the actual trunk. We had the picture card first. We doubled it just to make sure like carpet was the same color, the kind of details, like that swing of that door was the same. So we could, because that was going to be in our frame. And we just had flyaway walls, including the top as well. And we block shot the entire sequence because once one wall was out, it just was a whole thing.
Sure.
To de-rig, take the camera out, pull the box out, new lighting, and so forth. So when we were prepping, I went into my own trunk while my DP drove, and I took a camera phone and I recorded what it looked and felt like in a trunk. So I got
like
to
on
see,
your iPhone, basically, you pulled out your yeah, cool.
Yeah, I got to
sounds
see
illegal.
It sounds very illegal, but it was very safe. It was in my neighborhood. We were not going over 20. You know what I mean? And we would just wanted to see how the light changed and what we did see in a trunk. And you actually can see a lot more in a trunk than what people actually think.
Oh, interesting. That's
What
it's not dark.
I think my trunk would be pitch black, but I could be wrong.
No, because remember, you also have your your brake lights, right? Your brake lights are red, and
that's
there's
fun.
nothing preventing that on the inside to not show. They're not blacking out that. It's just a piece of carpet or metal or plastic. So you have the bleed of the brake light. You have the edges of the trunk frame on top that leak light through. And on older cars, and we had, our picture vehicle was 80s Oldsmobile, they had like that grid that kind of ventilates a little bit, right? And so there was lots of opportunities to actually see light in the car, which I felt was very, very believable. It's dark in there, but the movement of the light was something that we took very, very seriously. And we have probably some like behind the scenes videos and photos of like a grip with like holding a big twig of leaves, right? And just going like, through the light. So that you have some sprinkles. So
and you can use the sound effects too, which is nice.
Yeah, like sound design was such a big thing. We're actually writing a No Film School article about the trunk sequence and sound design is a big one that I put down as our last step. Yeah, It was hard, but it was really awesome, very fulfilling. And that's the thing, when you've got 10 minutes of it, I don't think you're really bored because we really move all around. And keep it going.
Every square inch of those 10 square feet get used. I know we're doing this interview backwards, but my last question is, how did this movie come to be?
Our DP, Justin Alpern, came up to me one day and was like, I have this idea and I want to make it. I'm like, okay, tell me. And he pitched this idea of this couple's kidnapping and then kind of a couple different other plot points. and he wanted to start the first sequence in the trunk, which is a very typical DP pitch. Like, what's the most challenging camera thing I could possibly do? Trunk. Got it.
I don't want to use any lights in the trunk.
So he had this, like, the kernel of that idea, and I kind of took it away and kind of made it into what the script was. My friend David and I had always wanted to collaborate on something, and we were very much on the same wavelength on what kind of stories that we want to talk about. And, the setup became this one thing, but I brought in a lot of other things and other ingredients in this big pot to make it really, really interesting. There is a really sub-layer of racial complexes in the film that is not obvious, but once you get it, it hooks really deep. And I really think that's special, and that's really meaningful for me as a filmmaker. And yeah, we wrote it, and the original goal was to make it for like very small amount of money. And then it kind of grew because once we started casting and we were able to like attach the talent that we were able to get, we're like, oh, okay, maybe we should really like figure out a little bit more professional way of doing this just to make sure that we're doing it right. That was in the beginning of 2020. And we were going to shoot in Lorain, Ohio in March of 2020. And then we could not.
But you shot the winter of 2019. I understand. We squeaked by, but if you literally started a month earlier, you would have been in post for 2 years, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was on an airplane back from scouting and interviewing key crew members the weekend before everything shut down. And we had that conversation on the plane, Justin and I, of like, what if we can't do this? And we're just like, I guess we'll figure it out once we get there. It's going to
be in New York. It's fine.
Yeah. So we were partially financed at that point, Oren, to go back to your question, because that version was really small because Ohio granted us other opportunities where we didn't have to pay. And that's actually where I worked with Joe, because Joe was working on Ohio incentive where most of our labor would have been paid by a workforce program. Our budget was like tiny at that point, and we could have done it for that little because we were locations for like $0. We had the Lorain Police Department standing by just shut down our streets because they're not busy anyways. So we really just had put like hard cost of like, putting up some actors and getting
pizza
amazing catering.
And
Justin has a camera grip company, so the gear was mostly free because he was going to sponsor that. So that budget was like $150, and then we couldn't do that version for $150, and we kind of had to reevaluate, but kind of like took us 2 years to kind of figure out what the next version of the movie would be. And it grew bigger because we committed to shooting in LA, thinking that we would get kind of the friends and family favors, which we still did. But the budget grew because I think once you're here, you kind of have to follow a lot more rule. Which
you don't get the police.
No, we had to pay the police.
Yeah. And it's not just the money, but like all the bureaucracy that you have to go through, and the people that you need to talk, and the canvassing and like put notes up. Like it's just such a time.
So I canvassed and put notes up myself.
Really?
I did too. I surveyed that neighborhood that we shot in also.
And let me ask you, Ruth, actually, I think there are some kind of distinct advantages to it. Did you find any advantages? Talk to us about that, actually.
Shooting in LA?
Yeah, it was specifically like doing the grunt work of canvassing the neighborhood you were shooting. Yeah.
Well, the one thing that I learned about independent filmmaking throughout my many, many years of working as a crew member, right, is that if I wasn't happy as a crew member, I would be very pissed at Above the Line. You know what I mean? I would not be happy going to work every single day. And that feeling of people not enjoying the time that they spend on set with you, I think is poison. So it's always been a personal philosophy of mine, is just to really make sure everyone's having a good time, even though the work is hard. You work long hours, you work at night, it's freezing or it's really hot. We had all the elements in our August movie, So things like canvassing on a day off that took an hour of my time was way better than someone being hired for $200 to do, who has no allegiance to the film whatsoever. They don't know how to answer the questions. So if I'm talking to a neighbor of a location, I can answer all the questions that you may have. And I can assure you that we will not park in front of your driveway.
And you can say, here's my phone number. If you ever have any problems, you can contact me personally.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like just,
or my producer in your case.
We're here to be responsible, and we didn't have any issues from what I at least reported to me on the day, because I think we just knew what we were doing. It was very, very personal. The location owner of the house that we had specifically was so accommodating to us. Like, let me tell you what a great hack it is to find a great house location, but also find your picture animal at the exact same house.
Was it an iguana?
It was a little puppy.
Yeah.
It was a puppy.
That's great.
It was a great twofer.
Yeah,
we just got really lucky in that way.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of like independent filmmaking, is like,
and doing it yourself, right? Like being able to, oh, hey, your dog is incredible. We actually need one for the movie versus, or I think all of that context just helps you understand the environment in which you're making your film more,
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
When $200 goes a long way and you have an hour to like knock on some doors and know that it's getting done right. That's the other thing. Like when you canvas and you're like, oh, I paid somebody to do this, you're really paying someone to tell you they did it. Like there's a lot of like knock here, there's a sticker on the door before they have a chance to answer. You know what I mean? Like the patience and the TLC that you're going to put into it yourself is very different than just someone who's,
Yeah, we should do an episode on this, because I like literally have no idea what surveying or canvassing even is, other than
you have to
producers telling me that that's something that they need to do.
Literally, you have to like knock on every door in like a certain route. Ruth, you probably remember better than I do, but a certain area, right? Like half a mile of your location, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Like depending on what it is. If it's commercial, it's different. If it's residential, they kind of, the film like gives you a map and basically says, please do everything within this circle. And then you need to turn in a handful, like a certain number of neighbors saying yes,
like they sign
for you to get a permit. Yeah. You have to give them a physical piece of paper.
Oh, wow.
Well, and I used
Which means
to live...
you probably have to go back twice, because you leave it in the door and then you come back the next day to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't know. I was definitely really, really involved in the movie, but I think that's also really important because, I knew what I wanted to spend the most money on, right? Like I knew what our budget was, and we had a great team making sure that we were on budget and that production was running smoothly. But it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, I'm going to save money on this because I want to spend money on this.
Sure.
Because if I spend money on this, it's going to look like this, it's going to feel like this, and that's going to be way better than, this alternative idea. So I was really involved from a scheduling budget point of view because I had to. Yeah. I had a great team, definitely, but in order to make this movie look like a $20 million movie, I had to just get involved and dig deep.
Yeah. It's interesting. Because I go back and forth on this. I have a bad habit, I'm sure Matt does too, of saying, oh, well, I'll take like 2 less extras if we can get the Steadicam on the second day. Kind of doing that bartering. Whereas I see the directors that are super successful that just keep getting bigger and bigger jobs are like, get us the extras and get us the Steadicam. We need both of them.
Well, it depends on whose pockets you're demanding from, right? That's the real issue.
Yeah. I've been on the receiving of those asks of like, I'm not going to do this if you're not going to give me this and that, right? Sure. Cool. And from the producing element, if those are small potatoes versus a bigger thing that we're trying to accomplish, I will find the few $100s that you want for a Steadicam. There's always a way to do it, right? There's always some contingency or small something to figure it out.
And then will you be mad at me if I end up not using the Steadicam at all?
Yes.
Will you be mad at me if we shot some shots on the Steadicam, but they didn't make it into the final cut?
No, because if you shot with the Steadicam, at least that person's getting paid for what they were meant to do that day. Yeah. What ends up on the cutting room floor is a whatever. At that point, that's the best part for creativity.
I like that attitude, Ruth. I like that.
Okay, but I just got those shots with the Steadicam because I felt that.
So I learned this lesson very early on when I was working on this movie in upstate New York. It was my last movie that I did in New York as a second AD. And it was like, I don't know, between 2 and 3 million at the time, which was in 2012, was like not too bad. It went like a lot
5
longer.
million now, probably.
Yeah. It went a lot longer. We had an incredible cast: Diane Kruger, Jason Clarke, Brie Larson, amazing team. And it was this movie called The Better Angels. And it was a very slow-paced drama, historical drama, but every day of prep, everyone was talking about the big fire, the church fire.
Mm-hmm.
And we did it practically. So we had special effects, stunts, and it was like 30 background dressed in period costume running out of this church fire. Big scene. Arguably like the culmination of this historical fiction experience. A lot of prep went into it. And, as a second, I'm prepping this with the other team while we're still on set. And it's upstate New York in November and it's very cold. And I'm in a tent with a portable heater. So this job was very difficult. And when we shoot this fire sequence, which, took a whole day to set up and then a half a day to shoot, it was very rewarding in that way. And everyone was like, yeah, we did the fire. It's done. Now we have like only a week left of like dialogue. Cool. It gets into Sundance, right? And a lot of the cast and crew go. We finally get to watch the movie from the crew side. And afterwards, I was like, I feel like something is missing. Where is the church fire? Didn't make it in the movie.
Incredible.
Arguably the most expensive thing out of the entire film that caused the most stress for a lot of people, the most dangerous thing that we did, for sure. And it's not in the movie. So that I learned as like, listen, you just can't be too precious with it. If it doesn't need to be there from a creative standpoint and it actually hinders the creative work, so be it.
But would the movie have been better with the church fire? Come on, be honest.
Probably. I don't know. It's really, it was beautiful. It was epic. And like, I clearly see, like, I have a vision of the wide so clearly in my mind because it was one of those like big, long dolly shots. You see the fire in the church in the distance and you follow Jason Clarke with a bucket as he tries to like bucket his way to save the church. Like, it's so epic.
If it was my movie, that would be the credit sequence. I would just put it under the credits for no reason. Like
I think that's what happened in Ghostbusters, right? I think that there's like in Ghostbusters, in the Paul Feig Ghostbusters, there's a big musical sequence that they cut that was very expensive.
That they just put at the end?
I think they made it the credit sequence.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Awesome. Well, they didn't do that in Samson, which you should check out. It's out right now, right?
It's out November 29th.
Probably, yes. I think this is going to come after November 29th.
Okay, cool.
So celebrate the holidays with Samson.
There you go.
We like to think is enjoy your consumerism on Black Friday and watch Samson on November 29th.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, do you have just a couple minutes to do an unpaid endorsement with us?
Unpaid endorsements.
My unpaid endorsement is for Paramount Plus. Do either of you two subscribe for Paramount Plus?
Not currently.
Not currently. I think it's not like the most popular streaming service for sure. It's like pretty under the radar and will probably be going away after all of these mergers. But it's great for Survivor, Ruth, but also it has like a surprisingly large bank of movies. It's not super searchable, but consistently, if I've been looking for a movie that's like a little bit older, it's more likely that it's on Paramount Plus than any other streaming service, honestly. I think most of the other streaming services aren't filling their libraries with old content. Max, maybe a little bit, but basically because Paramount has the Paramount library, there's a pretty significant amount of stuff down back there. And so if you like movies that aren't made by Netflix, sorry, no disrespect, but like, like a real movie, you know what I mean? Paramount Plus actually has a pretty good repository of them. So I've never seen, this is going to be really embarrassing, don't roast me in the comments, but I'd never seen Heat, which is like a Film Bro required reading film. And I was like, oh, it's time I just watch Heat.
Have you seen Fight Club?
Yeah, exactly. So like, obviously I've seen Fight Club, but I should have seen Heat. And so that was on Paramount Plus. I was like, great, this is perfect. So that's my endorsement. It's also pretty affordable. And if you like Survivor, it's on that. Ruth, what you got?
Okay, I have 2 endorsements because I had a pretty epic Saturday and they just both need to be shouted out. So the first is a little theater company called ESTLA. That's Ensemble Studio Theater LA, and they are in Atwater Village. They have a program called the Ignite program, which really develops brand new playwrights. And I got the opportunity to direct a scene with a new play this past Saturday. And I was just really kind of blown away by like all the different plays that were showcased. And I just thought it was a cool program. And they're looking for their next round of cohorts. So their applications open in January. So I just think it's so cool if you're a playwright or even just like a budding playwright trying to figure out how to get into theater. I think it's a great opportunity. And my second endorsement is Castle Green, the venue in Pasadena, California. I went to a wedding Saturday night at Castle Green, and I was blown away. It is this historical landmark building that feels like it's been around for a century, which it probably has. And it's just pristinely done and felt like I was in an old movie walking in. Like it has this gate that you walk in and this beautiful lawn, and you just look up at the staircase, and literally it feels like it's been untouched for over 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this wedding was incredible. Congrats, Kat and Cole. But like the feeling that you get walking into this venue was so cool. And so I did a little digging on it. And it's not open to the public unless you go for an event, but they have 2 tours that you can do. They do twice a year. But they also allow filming and scouting.
Oh, cool.
So I'm like, that's the in.
So you don't
just
film
scout
anything,
it.
just
It's
scout
like right in downtown Pasadena. It's like
It's
right.
literally, it's right
Yeah,
there.
that's
It's
wild.
amazing.
By the way, scouting is the best hack ever. Like if you want to go to Warner, to the Universal lot, back lot,
Yeah.
just go scout
Just
it.
scout it.
Just book a scout.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So it's like, that's why I think everyone needs to go visit Castle Green and just say you're scouting, and then you don't have to pay the venue fee or make your friends get married there.
Oh, yeah. Your
It was-
friend's
it
wedding
was
was a sham
magical.
wedding, right? It was just
Yeah.
for free entrance.
But yeah, we were all very excited. We have a book club. And so when us book clubbers got the invite and we found out it was Castle Green, we were very, very excited. Like many petties were had on Friday. Hair
Mhm.
appointments were made. We made it a whole weekend out of it, and it was a great time. And it was worth it because Castle Green was incredible.
I feel like Pasadena weddings, they go hard. They're pretty fancy. It's like kind of like the old LA sort of like, it's this mixture of like new Spanish colonial, which is still like at this point 100 years old, and then even older architectural styles. Yeah, très fancy, as I like to say.
Yeah. So good.
Kaplan, what you got, buddy?
I found this book called like 300 Jokes for Kids or something.
Oh, great.
And I,
So into it. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, I remember when I was a kid in, the 90s, and I printed
Yeah,
out.
the 90s is when you were a kid, Oren.
I was under 18 years old, and I found some, website or whatever they were called, like a list of like, 1,000 interesting facts. And I printed it out, and I would just like walk around my school, just like telling people interesting facts. And I thought, I was like, oh, my daughter, and I joke a lot, and she likes riddles and knock jokes and things. And so I bought it. And last night she was just laying in bed, just like reading this book for like hours. And I like, every time I'd walk by, she'd be like, Dad, what's a pirate's favorite letter or whatever. Like, they're not all great jokes. Yeah. How do you know?
I know that one.
You've read
how
the
can
book, Ruth.
How can you tell oceans are friendly?
They wave?
Oceans are,
Mhm.
They wave. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
I love a good dad joke and like
Mhm.
pun stuff so
Oh, yeah.
much.
So it's kind of like
I love
this
it.
thing that seems so outdated, right? A book of jokes. Why would you need a book of jokes? You got Twitter. But like, it just give it to a kid, and it's just, I don't know. It just like made me super happy.
Yeah.
If you're looking for something to give your kid.
Cute.
And also I watched this movie, it's award season, so I'm trying to like watch everything. And there's this movie, D.I.D.I.
It's supposed to be great, right?
Yeah, it takes place in Fremont, which
Oh,
is,
cool.
not that far from where you grew up, Matt.
Yeah.
And it's about this kid. He grows up in the 90s. He's also a kid in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was good. It was like super relatable. It has this, I think it's a problem. I mean, it has like a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes or something. So clearly nobody else thinks this is a problem, but I sometimes have problems with movies where characters like don't say anything and just stand there awkwardly every single scene. There's a movie called The Way, Way Back. Steve Carell is in it.
Yeah.
It has the same problem. Like a main character he's so,
I love The Way, Way Back.
it's so like adorable, and you really want him to succeed, and you totally understand him. But then like anytime someone's like, hey, you want to hang out? He'll just like stand there and not say anything and like fall apart. And I get it. I was like that myself. But in a movie, you kind of want a character to be like active, which this character is in the movie. It was really good, but it kind of made me think like, if you don't have an idea for a movie, like literally just write about your day to day as a kid. And if you can find some poignant parts
Oren's
of
like,
that
have you heard of biographies?
and be very specific. No, but it's just a movie. It's just a slice of life about this kid growing up in Fremont, and
Yeah.
it's just really specific about like who he hung out with and how he skateboarded and how he was into filming and what his family dynamic was like. But it's nothing crazy.
Yeah, it's
like
not
there's not insane
revolutionary.
plot. There's not a crazy premise. There's not, and it's really like a solid.
Oren, you're just
film.
describing indie films before we had to make money on.
Yeah, but I bet Dee Dee made money. I mean, based on the cast.
I hope so. I truly hope so.
I think it's
I
a
hope so.
Sundance film, right?
Yeah, it did. It definitely like a big festival hit for sure.
And
Maybe
it's his
South
first
by
movie,
whatever.
His
Either
first
way,
feature. Sean Wang. Anyway, check it out if you want to. It's. I saw one review say it's kind of it's as kind of authentic as 8th Grade, or kind of that same thing with like kind of some of that Northern California nostalgia of Lady Bird, and and kind of the visual style of what's that Jonah Hill movie that was shot in 4:3
mid-90s.
Yeah, mid-90s
or the 90s, maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, it's good. So check it out, or at least write a movie about your childhood and get it into Sundance.
Yeah, let us know if you do.
Either one of those. Anyhow, Ruth, if people want to find out more about you or Samson, where should they go?
I am on Instagram at Ruthie06. That's RUTHIE06. And Samson Instagram is SamsonMovie23.
Cool. I like the numbers.
Yeah.
I'm on Instagram. You can follow me. I'm at Kaplan. You can also follow our podcast at Just Shoot a Pod across all social media.
Yeah, we've been posting more stories and such. I don't know if you've noticed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Getting
I've
up in
noticed,
the stories game.
Yeah.
Cool.
Get in there. So yeah, do us a favor, give us a follow, even give us a share if you found something helpful, for sure.
Or at least just leave a comment.
Yeah, either way.
We will read all of them.
And hit us up at justshootapod@gmail.com if you have any long-form questions. We've got a couple. We're going to do a mailbag episode soon. You can follow me at Mr. Maddenlow across all social media. This episode was edited by Kevin O. Yang and produced by Tyler Small. And you're listening to music provided by the Free Music Archive and the artist Jahzzar. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks, Ruth.